about 10 years ago, in our community, headlines like this were not unusual. In fact, again, around our community at this time, these headlines are popping up again. And it began to ask, well, many of us began to ask the question, what is happening? Why are our youth choosing a lifestyle that involves drugs, gangs, violence, criminal activity, and leads to death for many of them? As we're asking this question, and I was a 32-year-old new vice principal, our superintendent popped by my school, and it's kind of a big deal. For 20 years, I've been in public schools, and for the last year and a half in an independent school. And he said to me, he said, I want you to go and visit a community of character. Go have a look at this. Now, what's interesting about this is, personally, my wife and I had been married about 7 years at that time. We had 2 children, and even as I say this, it sounds crazy, but we had not spent even one night apart in 7 years. So for me to accept his invitation was a big deal. So I went home, talked to my wife, and I said, look, what do you think? We prayed about it, because that's what we do. And we had peace. So I said to him, okay, I'll do it. So I went, myself, the board of education chair, we went to a community of character. And this experience ignited a fire under me, which has lasted for a decade. What we saw there and what we came back with was hope. The picture of the mayor of this community, the fire chief, police chief, business leaders, community leaders, educators, others, children, parents, all united around a common vision, a common language, really, and watching them interact gave us the idea that this could really do something. We could actually make change happen here. Not like this, but over time. So we came back, gave this report, and the result was a group of leaders in Abbotsford today who are our character council, who are working together in a slow burn. And I'm hesitant to use that example because the fire chief is in the mix in this group. So I'm always careful with that. But it is a slow burn. It's not something that's a flash in the pan or let's just do this or have a parade and we're done. It takes time. And it takes, getting right to the foundation of who we are. We held a forum of about 70 community leaders, and it was April of 2011. Just to get them in a room seemed like a really big deal. It was a diverse group of leaders representing many different parts of our community. And what was really powerful is at the end of that 3-hour session, we were able to funnel down this idea or this question of what is it that Abbotsford is about? What is it that we value? What are the attributes that are really, really important to us? And we came up with respect, responsibility, integrity, empathy, courage, and service. And now the Character Council, we all carry this coin in our pockets that reminds us of these 6 values. Now, at this point, I should tell you that, we're not a political organization, although there's politicians in the mix. And we're not a religious organization, although there are religious folks in the mix. I'm a Christian, a follower of Christ. Instead, what we are is a group of people committed to the vision of a community that lives out its shared values daily and is committed to promoting character. It's led to 2 major initiatives. We have a youth forum under the BC Schools of Character umbrella, so we've got this network of schools that come together. And then we also have a national conference, which, we have 2 of them, and it's really starting a conversation across Canada. What does character look like, and why is it important? So, what have we learned? And I'm going to share with you just a few things that we have learned through our journey. Number 1, character isn't something you do, but it's how you do everything. Character is not something you do, but it's how you do everything. So, doing my taxes, that's something I do, and then I stop doing that. Driving my kids to school is something I do, and then I do other things. If someone cuts me off on the road, that's something I may have to respond to and do. But character is the overlying influence on all of those things that we do. And so that's one of the major learnings for us. In a school setting, it's not that you do socials, then you do mathematics, and then, we're going to switch gears and do character. But rather, it's a part of the whole process. Secondly, I don't know if if you think of somebody who you would say that's a person of character, even if for a moment, if you pause and think, who would you say that has been a person of character in my life? Now, the criteria for you, and for me for sure, is it's not necessarily that they said, I'm a person of character. They may never have said that. It's not that they said we need to be respectful. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But it's the fact that they were, isn't it? It's the fact that they lived it and modeled it. And this is one of our learnings. In order to spread this, and infect others, it requires me to model this all the time the best I can. Another thing we've learned is that you've got to identify your own values. So if you're a family, whether you're a school or an organization, it's very important that you identify your values. How do you do that? Well, one thing I could do is I could go back and look at our old strategic plan that's been there for a number of years and see, okay, that's what we said we're about. Or you could look at some old minutes, or there's different ways to identify that. Maybe it's been part of your vision statement for decades. This is who we are. What we've learned is it's very important to spend the time to bring all the people, all the voices together, and to say, look, what are we about? What is it that we stand on? And by asking that question, there is buy-in around the room. Now, we could probably identify what most people would start with. What would be one value almost every organization will say we need to be about? Fire one out. Honesty, sure, integrity, respect, right? These things will come out. But if one of us went in and said, I think you should pick these values, it wouldn't have the same power. It requires the group saying, this is what we're about, this is what we're passionate about. Next, it's important to weave it in everywhere. And so another part of our learning is that once you've got these values, these attributes identified, whatever they are, character values, now plug them in. So you could put posters on the walls, right? A nice visible statement. This is what we're about. But I would argue, and I think what we've learned is, if you do a deeper, long-term weaving in, you may not even need the posters, because people will know what you're about. So, for example, if you are hiring, or if I'm hiring somebody for my business, the question would be, if we say empathy is one of our, very important in our organization, when I hire, do my interview questions include something around that value? So would I say to somebody, tell me the last time that you were empathetic towards someone else in the workplace? Now, would the person say, hey, I'm applying for a construction job here. Well, I'm sorry, do you want to see me swing the hammer? No, we're going to start with this, because this is important to me. I'm a teacher. I work with kids. This is important to us. So hiring practices. What about HR? In your HR manual, does it lay out exactly what you stand for and what your expectations are for your employees? What about when you do evaluations on each other? So I will receive an evaluation within my organization. Does it center on those core things that we value? And by weaving it in at a much deeper level, you may or may not need to put posters up, because when people come into your business, I don't know if this is your experience, if I go into a business to buy something, I can tell within minutes, seconds, if I feel respected, if I feel valued as a customer. I'm choosing to spend my money here. I can tell very quickly if they get along. You hear employees talking, and whether they have the poster on the wall that says respect or not, I'll know. Would you agree? Right? You can feel it right away. With children, and I'm an educator, and a powerful tool is teachable moments. Again, weave it in everywhere. It's on classroom walls. You talk about it at assemblies, but there are moments, and for my wife and I, we have 4 kids, there's opportunities to glaze right by teachable moments. Or there's an opportunity to pause and say, you know what, let's think about this. We talk about integrity and telling the truth. I could just say, don't lie. That's, this is a bad thing. Or I could say, one of our values is to tell the truth in our home. Isn't it? Have we talked about it? Yeah. Tell me how you feel. And so these teachable moments are critical. Some of our learning. Let's talk about results and data. And in some of the schools I've been in, here's a question. How do you measure what didn't happen? How do you measure what didn't happen? So if I could go back in time to 2009, that first article, that heading about a young person dying in Abbotsford because of their gang-related, drug-related connections. If I could go back in time a couple of years before that and intentionally focus on that kid and weave character development intentionally into their life. And as a result, at that party, when someone said, hey, you want to try this? The kid says, you know, I've been talking a lot with this guy about respect for my family, for myself, for my body. You know what? No thanks. And then that kid goes on and graduates from school, gets B's, does okay, starts a small business. Now, today, that same person is raising a family. How do we measure, if we input that kind of intentionality into their life, how do we measure what would have happened if we hadn't? Do you know what I'm saying? It's a tricky piece. What we can do, and we wrestle with this for sure, but what we can do is look at some trends. And so things like attendance records and discipline referrals in schools. We do satisfaction surveys. You know, do you feel safe in your school? Look at those trends. Are they moving in the right directions? Leadership development. A lot of schools are very intentional, in some of the character schools I've been in, very intentional in developing leaders. And how many kids are we growing? And what kinds of things are they doing? These are some of the things we can do. I can tell you that we knew, and again, you know, this is probably like 6 or 7 schools I've been in, but here's some examples. We knew in one of the character schools, we knew something good is happening when, I don't know if you've heard of a grad prank. How many of you have done a grad prank? Okay, well, this is the thing where administrators the night before school starts are in fetal position in the corner of the bedroom, right, wondering what's going to happen. And so they hadn't done anything on the first. This is like year 3 of our intentional character development of these kids. A couple of kids came out to me. I'm standing outside in supervision, early morning, beautiful day. I remember it crisp. Mr. Manuel, yep, we're wanting to do a grad prank. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. But we want your permission. Okay. What? Okay, step 1, that sounds really good. That means I own whatever they destroy. So they want my permission. What are you planning to do? And what they talked about was, and the reaction for me was just such pride in these kids. I was so proud of them. We have gathered donations from the grad class of clothing, good clothes that we have that we're not using, and so others have bought stuff. We've gathered donations from our family and friends, and we want to take all those clothes and hang them all over the school. I'm like, this is a grad prank I can buy into. Powerful, right? And some of these kids, if you go into their little circle in their conversation, you can hear them saying, hey, why don't we do this? No, that sounds not really, I don't think that's respectful. Why don't we do something that makes it, you know, you can hear them talking. We knew some good things were happening when, for me, in year 1 as a vice principal, if I'm disciplining a student, it would be things like, what did you do wrong? You can't do that anymore. You know, as a result, I'm going to have to give you this, and you're going to have to do that. Okay. By year 4, you know, when a student would come in, I would say to them, look, what is it that we stand for? What does it mean to be a part of this school community? I'm sorry. Yeah. Absolutely, I should have been more of this. And it was such a shift because what they had learned is to be a part of this community means we are this. Not that we should be, we are, by definition of being a part of this community. We knew good things were happening when instead of the new students coming in, instead of the orientation for them saying, this is what we stand for, this is what we're about, instead of it being us adults doing it, we had senior students doing it for them, saying, look, this is, you know, I'm in grade 11 here, and you got to know we don't push people around in the halls here. This is a respectful school. Now you're one of us. Do you see the power in that, right? And we knew good things were happening when that started to happen. I know, you know, when I look past some of these kids as they move past school, I know great things are coming because the same students that made an impact and were being trained this way in schools are now impacting their universities. I could list off students. They're now impacting where they work. One of them is now helping to lead this same organization. She graduated from one of our character schools, is now co-chairing part of the movement. Good things are happening, and it's very exciting. So, will you join us? I'm really a recruiter. There's nothing to sell. There's nothing for you to buy other than a vision. Will you inspire the people around you? Whether it's one person, whether it's your family or those that close to you, your organization, will you inspire them? Will you, together with them, identify your values together? Critical. Hey, let's have a conversation. My wife and I did that with our kids this summer. What are the things we want to, this year really that we're about? Will you identify those? Maybe it's maybe a large corporation, whatever. And then intentionally integrate them everywhere. And the intentional piece is critical. The future is bright. People, the future is bright. And again, the question is, are you willing to be a champion of good character? And maybe even a better question, can any of us afford not to? Thank you.